Daniel Ricciardo has been kicked out and replaced by Liam Lawson starting from Austin, and it looks like the Australian driver's time with Red Bull is over. But there are still other choices he could make in the future. The Austrian team has offered him something that might be really hard to say no to. Could we see Ricciardo stay with Red Bull but doing a different job? And if he does, can he help the team grow from outside the racing car? It's fair to say that Ricciardo leaving the sport was one of the most confusing things that fans had to watch. Everyone was acting like it was really his last race ever in Singapore, but the team never officially said this was happening. Even so, Ricciardo wrote a sweet message on Instagram to his fans and the engineers he worked with during his career. Now that everything has calmed down and he's been replaced with Liam Lawson, who everyone was waiting for, the big question is, what happens next for Ricciardo? Red Bull has been criticized for how they handled his career. Many fans say they treated him even worse than McLaren did because they didn't let Ricciardo finish the season with the team where he started. But Red Bull has offered him a really nice solution for his life after Formula Racing. Ricciardo could work for Red Bull as their spokesperson. This is something that Hamilton tried to work out with Mercedes, but it didn't work because he wanted way too much money. When talking about Ricciardo and Red Bull, Helmut Marko talked about giving Ricciardo a chance in a different type of racing. Marko said more. Daniel Ricciardo is especially popular in the United States, one of the most liked drivers. I don't think he would want to try NASCAR, and if he's not racing anymore, I don't know if he would want to do all the publicity stuff that comes with being a spokesperson. What's really important to know is that Ricciardo hasn't said he's retiring, and at his age, it would be wrong to think he can't race anymore. Champions like Alonso and Raikkonen came back from retirement and found new homes successfully. So whether the future has something exciting for Ricciardo, only time will tell. But what's definitely true is that he has marketing value like no other driver on the track. This shows through his charm and big smile, one of the main reasons why companies like Visa, Cash App, and Hugo Boss decided to get into the sport in the first place. But according to Helmut Marko, even though things were confusing when Ricciardo was let go by the team, the Australian knew there was a chance he could lose his spot. That's why he was okay with it in Singapore. Talking more about this situation, Marko said the timing of Ricciardo's release happened because of many different factors and duties. He was told about it, and his goodbye performance was, I think, the fastest lap that still showed what skills he has, not all the time and not at the level that would have made us think he deserved to come to Red Bull Racing. But that was a perfect performance. It's an open secret that, if it wasn't for Ricciardo, these companies wouldn't have supported Racing Bulls. That makes it really hard for the AlphaTauri team right now because Visa and Cash App are the main sponsors of the team. This means they could very well pull out now that their main moneymaker is gone. People think they were really against replacing Ricciardo with Lawson because the 8-time race winner was good for business, and honestly, nobody could blame Visa and Cash App. They're here for the money and marketing. Even if Lawson manages to do better than Tsunoda and gets himself noticed for a Red Bull seat, these companies won't be as interested because the 22-year-old won't make nearly the same amount of money as Ricciardo did for these companies. This is why Red Bull is willing to help Ricciardo as a real member of the team, where he would be able to share the team's values through his publicity work. But whether the Australian would be open to that, only time will tell. When he was fired from McLaren, Red Bull took him back after giving Nick de Vries 10 races to prove himself. After not being able to perform the way he was expected to in a year and a half, the only thing we could blame the Austrian team for is the confusing way they handled Ricciardo's career. But that's all in the past now, and what Red Bull wants is more popularity and fans in the USA. This would naturally happen after their partnership with Ford starts from 2026. But without a doubt, Ricciardo's appearances in the USA were always amazing. And you couldn't forget that he showed up like a real cowboy riding a horse during the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, representing the spirit of the true American fan during this race weekend. This is something that Red Bull respects a lot, and if they can continue growing their brand as well as Visa and Cash App in the USA, it could very well be through Ricciardo. The only question he needs to answer is whether he's ready to do this kind of job, because it's the complete opposite of what he's done until now, racing. But the fact that Ricciardo wants to take a step back and think about what's happened throughout his career, as well as letting the fairy tale career ending not happening sink in, points toward a situation where we will see more of the 8-race winner with Red Bull still. Ricciardo not being part of Red Bull and not being able to meet the requirements needed to be considered as a real replacement for Perez is hurting his chances to return to the sport as a full-time racing driver. With teams, apart from Sauber, no other team is offering seats for 2025. With 4 rookies entering the sport from next season, it's definitely a sign that teams and bosses are turning more and more toward the strength and desire to prove themselves that these young drivers have, rather than the experience of older drivers. But Sauber might have to update their list because there are 3 drivers on it right now: Bottas, Bortoleto, and Colapinto. If the Swiss team that's going to become Audi from 2026 decides that experience is better than youth, Ricciardo could very well be included in the shortlist still. Marko's statements show the importance and main reason why Ricciardo wasn't considered for the Red Bull seat next to Verstappen. and the final step toward his fairy tale ending of his career with the Austrian team. As the veteran Austrian said, "I think it was clearly told that he has to be much better than Yuki Tsunoda, and he only managed to do that in a few races. So it was clear that this story of the lost son coming back to Red Bull Racing unfortunately didn't work out." He said very well that he is at peace with himself and has accepted his situation. And we will see what his plans for the future are. The comments about Ricciardo's racing ability didn't end there, as Marco decided to say that the Australian lost his special skill when he left them back in 2018, in one of the most controversial moves to Renault. Many fans think this was the start of his career going downhill. Talking more about this, Marco said, "I think the decision to leave Red Bull Racing was the turning point in his career. Then he didn't have a winning car at either Renault or McLaren. He did win at Monza, but those were special circumstances. I don't know what exactly happened, because if we knew, we would have helped him. But the speed, and above all, this late braking, and then he goes left or right. In these last few years he tried, but it was no longer there. The killer instinct was gone." Ricciardo had certain worries about the Honda engine, and apparently he listened more to the sweet talk of Renault and Cyril a bit. Money-wise, there wasn't much difference between what Renault offered him and what we offered. Again, the thing that Red Bull would have to think about right now is how much Ricciardo can help them grow the brand and keep the key money partners happy with Racing Bulls. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the situation with Visa Cash App and Hugo Boss about Ricciardo leaving will be looked at very differently in the coming time. All of this shows that the sport is a very mean place, and what's good for one side is definitely bad for the other. In this case, it's bad for Lawson, who only has 6 races to prove that he deserves a full-time 2025 contract with the AlphaTauri team. With all of this in mind, do you think there's a situation where Ricciardo will be a spokesperson for Red Bull? And if so, do you think that would be the perfect job for his after-racing life? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.